Hello, I'm Jane Winter, and it is a great pleasure to host this segment of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame show. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 125 women of distinction, women who have made immense contributions to the county and its residents, as well as to the world beyond. Honorees have distinguished themselves in many fields: education, science, business, philanthropy, the arts, politics, law, philosophy, and religion. Each honoree has been a force for positive change in our community. It is a great pleasure to acknowledge and document their contributions. And today it is my pleasure to introduce Colleen Hicks, who is being honored in the class of 2015 for her pioneering work in education about Native Americans. And welcome, Colleen.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
It's so nice to have you. And I thought, Colleen, that we might start with a little history about your family.
Well.
And I understand that your grandfather moved the family from the Midwest to Idaho. And I wonder if you could maybe share with me what caused that move and what change that made in your family's life.
Absolutely. My grandfather was Cherokee and Lakota, and what happened at that time was there was still very prevalent violence against Native Americans. And so every time he went into town, he was beat up by gangs of boys. He ended up having to carry a baseball bat. And so he just wanted to live in a more peaceful place. So he moved to southern Idaho, hoping to get away from that racial prejudice, and became a barber and set up, his family. And then the KKK found out that he was Native, and then forced them to leave Caldwell, Idaho, and move to northern Idaho. It was a lead smelter mining town, and still, there was still so much prejudice that you had to hide that you were Native American. And he set up his barber shop and commenced. That's where I grew up, is in northern Idaho.
Was that prevalent that Native Americans really have chosen to hide their heritage to combat the prejudice?
To survive. It was, very dangerous to be Native. I mean, the prejudice was so strong, and there was so much resentment and hatred, and you know, it was legal to kill a Native American in California for $5. There was a bounty on their head. So yes, many natives have had to hide that they were Native in order to survive the prejudice.
Now you have a very interesting blend of heritage. So you have the Native American heritage on your father's side, but your mother is Irish and English, and I believe that your great-grandmother was actually a member of the Daughter of the Revolution.
Daughters of the American Revolution, yes, I know.
That's right. So how have those two influences kind of influenced you and merged in your life?
Well, like I had said earlier, I feel very American. You know, it's from my Native American side and from the Daughters of the American Revolution. I do lots of lectures around the Bay Area to the historical groups, and you see the groups are very proud of their history, and I think it's a way of connecting to the past and to the land. And so it is that traditional natives talk all the time about memories of the blood. And so there's things that you know and you don't know why you know them. But if you research your history, your genetic history, you'll find out a tremendous amount about yourself. So from my Native American side, I was a long distance runner, and I would run the trails by myself, and people would say, "What are you doing out there?" I live, you know, in West Marin, and people were saying, "What are you doing on the trails?" And because of my mother being English-Irish, I grew up drinking tea every day. So I have my afternoon tea. So there are definitely there are strong motivations, and I feel so connected to the land and to the country because of that.
Now, music has always been an important part of your life, and how did that happen? Where did you get interested in music?
Well, my father was an absolutely astonishingly naturally gifted bass singer. And he sang in weddings and funerals and every event, and you know, in the car and in the house. And so it was a part of our life, this beautiful voice. And then when I was 12 and we got a piano and I took piano lessons, and I became his accompanist. And music is just this amazing thing that you can take with you for your whole life. You don't have to be a certain age to have music a big part of your life. Right now I sing with a former inductee, Jan Peterson-Shift, and the Singers of Marin and Wings of Song. And it just is just an enrichment of my life to be able to sing.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now, you also spent some time in Ghana, West Africa, teaching business classes to village women through the Organization for Rehabilitation, through training. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you got connected to that organization and a little bit about your experience in Ghana.
Absolutely. I got my master's in management at Sonoma State, and the person who was organizing the work in Ghana, she was building 12 preschools in 12 villages, and she wanted someone to come and teach business classes to women in the village. So I went there, but I actually also took music back also, and so to some of the preschool teachers, I was teaching some of the songs that I had taught in school. But the village classes, it was really interesting, and I noticed that there was, the women would hide their business and how well their business was doing from the men, because the men had the right to take the money. So we found out early on that we had to interview the women separately, and that, you know, they didn't want the men to know. But a good example was, you know, you'd ask them, how do you think they could improve their business? And they all said money. And then we'd say, well, we used the example of a woman who had taken her tomato crop to the market, and the taxi broke down and she lost her crop. And so then we said, well, how about you take half the crop and sun dry it? And then you wouldn't lose your crop. And you could see it was so exciting to share that, you know, like a new way of thinking.
Right.
Yeah, and so it was really profound. I really enjoyed being there. And also I saw how tribal people were. And it wasn't, whatever tribe was in power in the government, that tribe did really well. They didn't think of themselves as West Africans. They thought of themselves as Ghanaians, or, you know, the Ashanti, whatever tribe they were from. And when I came back and started working at the museum, I realized the same for Native Americans. You know, they don't say, I'm a Native American. They say, I'm a Cherokee or a Lakota, or, you know, Coast Miwok, whatever tribe you're from. So it's branching that out into making it more of a sense of, you know, the connection between Native Americans.
Right, and of course that museum is the Museum of the American Indian, and you joined the museum staff as executive director in 2005. And I wonder, can you tell us a little bit about the museum and the type of work that you do there?
Absolutely. I feel so passionate about what happens at the museum. The museum was formed 47 years ago. There was a large excavation at Miwok Park, and so they didn't have any place to put anything. So the Kiwanis bought the house for $1 and moved it down into Miwok Park. And so it started out as a repository, and it's developed into an educational cultural center. And we have classes that come from every county in the Bay Area, because in the 3rd and 4th grade, the children are supposed to learn about their local natives. And so to come to Miwok Park and have this really dynamic experience of being by a stream and under Grandma Bay and see the acorns falling, picking up the acorns, and it's just this really amazing way to learn about that natives not only were here, and we're here for thousands of years, 15, 20,000 years, not 200 years, and that Native people are still here. It's such an incredible way to wake, not only the kids, but all the parents that come. It's just surprising how little people know about Native Americans and educated people. It just is shocking to me, that people think all Indians live in teepees, where in fact the Coast Miwok lived in buildings that were called coches, and it was tule reeds or redwood bark. And so trying to show to people that there's a lot of cultural difference between the tribes is really important.
Right. Now you take your work outside of the museum, and can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the broader community?
Yes, for the last 9 years I've gone to every group that will have me. I've traveled all over the Bay Area to every historic group, every civic group, every university women group, anybody that will have me, I'll come and talk about what the museum does in terms of teaching and educating. Like I said, we have over 4,000 school children come for those Coast Miwok classes, but we also change the exhibit twice a year. And that's really fun, because even though the classes are Coast Miwok, because we're the Museum of the American Indian, we have exhibits from people all over, tribes all over. And that's just so interesting to see people come in and learn about Native culture. And so, Native people are still here. I always have pieces by contemporary artists in the exhibits to show that these aren't objects from the past. And the things in the exhibits aren't about the objects. They're just the way to tell the story about the culture and people.
And you, of course, had a long career as a teacher.
Yes.
And you were teaching music.
Yes.
But you did not have previous museum experience when you came to the museum.
No.
And I think you were sharing with me it was a very competitive process, and that there were people who were curators and had strong museum experience, but you were chosen over those people. And could you maybe give us a little insight as to how that came about?
Well, first of all, I think Spirit led me to this position, and I'm so grateful, because it's just enriched my life in so many ways, to be in the Native community, to be supporting the Native community, and to be teaching people and children. But first of all, you needed to be Native American to get the position, but then I had a master's in management, and so the board really wanted someone who could manage, because really we're a small staff. I'm full-time and the teacher is part-time, and so I basically do everything else. I even teach sometimes. So you have to really be able to understand all the parts, and I've learned to do curations in the process. But I think that life is one long learning experience, so I've been able to, very lucky to find people come forward and to help me. It's really been great.
So what are some of the challenges that you have at the museum?
Well, it's more than money, which is, being a nonprofit, a small nonprofit, but it's Native Americans I call the invisible minority. And people don't realize that there's Native Americans because if Natives drive cars or live in houses, they don't realize that they're really still very cultural people. And yes, there are a lot of mixed bloods now, but it's like they don't see us. They think that we're in the past, and it's just not true. There's a lot of Native people with rich cultures that are happening. And there's that, and there's also these myths that all Native people have government checks or casinos, and that's just not true. And I don't know why these myths. I've been trying to get to the bottom of it. I haven't understood exactly why people think that, but it's just not true. Native American, many reservations are, there's a lot of poverty there.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have never lived on a reservation.
No.
No.
My grandfather left.
Okay. And so he was living on a reservation in the Midwest and left and came to Idaho. Okay. How did you end up in California then?
That was, let's see, I was in Turkey. I went to visit a friend, and when I came back, I was at the University of Idaho, and then I transferred down to Sonoma State.
Okay. All right. Well, we're glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. I've been in Bolinas for 45 years.
Yeah. Great. I wanted to go back a little bit about your Native heritage. And, you're a mother, you have 2 daughters and 1 son, and you've welcomed your first granddaughter into the world just recently. Right. How has that affected your feeling about connecting and sharing your heritage with your children and your grandchildren?
Well, I think it's very important, particularly in today's society where, there's so much information that everybody can have at your fingertips, but you still need to know who you are in context. And so, like I had spoke of earlier about blood memories, there are things that you know and you don't know why you know them, but it explains who you are and what your passions are and what you're drawn to, why certain people, I see that in the museum where, I'll have a pottery exhibit and people that love pots come to that exhibit, or if I have a textile exhibit, then people come to see that exhibit. And it's always sort of interesting, like why people are drawn to certain things. And I want them to know who they are and where they came from. And it's, Native people now are being asked to be a part of many important environmental forums. They're saying, wow, the Native people lived here for 15,000 years and the land was pristine, and now in 200 years we're in trouble. We need to talk to you, and it's the concept, my Kashiapomo friend, when he gives lectures, he talks about reciprocity. That is very important in their spiritual life and their relationship with the land, is you just don't take, you give and take.
One thing that you wrote about yourself and being Native American is that we are caretakers of Mother Earth and all her living creatures, 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And I was wondering if you could maybe explain a little bit more about the 7 generations backwards and forwards.
Well, imagine if when you went out to do, like, say corporations, imagine that they were looking at not just the immediate, amount of profit, but what is going to be the impact? Like, what have we learned from the 7 generations before us? And what are we going to give to our children and our great-grandchildren, out? If we cut down all these trees, what are we giving them? That's what puts you in that, to learn what you had, the wisdom from the past. Elders are very respected in Native societies, and so they have wisdom. And so that when you share that, profound wisdom in what you make decisions in the future. And it's a huge responsibility. It isn't just an immediate gratification.
And you have felt a particular responsibility to stand up for Native people and to honor Native Americans' place in history and your enduring presence. And where does that feeling of responsibility come from?
Well, it started with my grandfather being beaten up and having to leave, and growing up being afraid to talk about being Native because there was so much prejudice. And it's gotten even amplified at the museum when the things that people say to me about Native Americans, educated people, is so shocking that I really feel like someone's got to say, no, that's not true. Not all Natives have government checks or casinos, or not all Natives are the same. We have this really rich cultural diversity in our country, and we should be celebrating that. And it's a really glorious thing. I've had archaeologists and anthropologists come from China and from Japan, and they wanted to see how we displayed our Native American pieces and culture. And it's to get people really interested in, it's the land's history, the land remembers. And so now we all own it, and to get people to really be excited about that and interested. is a challenge.
Yes, yes. Well, I think I'd be a little remiss if I didn't ask you to tell the viewers where the museum is located and a little bit about your hours and
Okay.
when to come visit.
Yes, it's in Miwok Park in Novato,
Okay.
and the little museum sits right in the middle of the park. It's a beautiful park, too. I mean, people can come and have a wonderful picnic and see the museum. And we're open Wednesday through Sunday, 12:30 to 4:30 to the public, and the office hours are Tuesday through Friday, 9:30 to 5. And the only day we're closed is Monday.
Okay.
And so,
Okay. And I would imagine that with such a small staff, because it's you're full-time and then your teacher is part-time, that you use a lot of volunteers.
Yes.
So if someone wants to volunteer, how do they get involved?
They could call the museum, 415-897-4064, and we have a website at www.marinindian.com.
Okay.
And we'd love to have more members and more people involved.
Okay, great, great. You know, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the role that nature and the environment has played in your life, because I know that that is a very, very important aspect.
Well, not only as being a Native person and being a runner, but when I grew up in a lead smelter mining town, the place was very polluted. It was one of the most toxic sites in America. Mm-hmm. And right outside the town was pristine wilderness. So I was lucky to be in these wild forests with bears and wolves and, you know, hunting for huckleberries, and at the same time where we lived was gray. You know, the grass didn't grow and the river was brown. They have since closed down the Bunker Hill, but so I really saw the effect of man on nature. And we're all a part of nature. It's really important, and we need to get back that symbiotic relationship so we know that we're not separate. We're a part of it, and all the creation stories with Native Americans show that.
So I wonder if you could maybe share with us a little bit about the people in your life who have really influenced you to follow this path into educating the public about, you know, really the rich cultural heritage of literally hundreds and hundreds of tribes in the United States. You know, obviously you are Native yourself, and you had a very influential grandfather, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. Are there other people or other experiences that have really influenced you to choose this path in life?
Since I've been the director of the museum, I became very close friends with Bradley Marshall, who is the Hoopa regalia maker, which is up northern California.
Okay.
And
Hoopa regalia.
Hoopa is the tribe,
okay.
And the regalia is what they wear when they're dancing.
Okay.
They're not costumes, and we
okay.
teach the children that word, regalia. And he has just been a profound influence on my life in terms of teaching me about Native Americans and present and past, and I've gone up to Hoopa and I've seen the traditional dances that have been going on for thousands of years, the jump dance, the white deerskin dance, you know, the brush dance, and he is my mentor, and I talk to him all the time about, you know, what direction I should go with an exhibit or, you know, classes, and he's been very profound for me.
It sounds like you have a bit of a balancing act too, because in your education work you're not only educating Native Americans about their own heritage, but you're educating non-natives.
Yes.
And so, can you tell me a little bit about the difference between those two?
Well, we try to be a bridge between the Native and the non-Native world. I mean, when we have Native people come in and they see that we're honoring them and celebrating them, and it's such an exciting thing. I love doing that so much. And then when non-Native people come in and they have questions and they feel safe asking and they say, I want to learn more about this, and they feel it's a place they can do that. A lot of times, you know, the mortars and pestles that people find in Marin County, even in their yards, they feel more comfortable bringing it to us than they don't, like, not sure maybe where to do it. So we feel like we're a bridge in mm-hmm. that way. And just like with collectors, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the object and the people, and we're trying to make that bridge, that mm-hmm. this object isn't isolated. It goes with the culture and people, and sometimes mm-hmm. people will have a piece that maybe they don't understand what it is, mm-hmm. you know, and how it was really used.
Can you maybe tell us a little bit, maybe tell us a story about a particularly interesting find that maybe someone brought in, or a particular piece that you've exhibited that really spoke to you personally?
Well, we have a giant prehistoric pot. I mean, it's giant. And I love that piece because, you know, we ask all the kids, what do they think it is? It's probably 10, 50, you know, about that old. Mm-hmm. And they were found in caves, and obviously not in this area because it's too wet, but in the caves in the Southwest. And so to imagine this really old piece is so beautiful, and it's still intact. And so I always ask the kids, what do you think they used this for? And they all go, soup. And I go, no, it wasn't soup, it was, you know, storage for corn. But there's no Costco or Target, there's no plastic. So with this one pot, you can see, you know, opening up this idea. And I said, obviously these people didn't travel. They weren't nomadic. They weren't like the Plains Indians that were traveling with the bison herds or the buffalo. You know, these people grew corn. So with one object, you can teach so much. So we find that with lots of the pieces.
Mm-hmm. That's great. What advice do you have for women in our community, particularly young women, to be fully engaged in supporting our community and each other?
Well, this is such an honor to be a part of this group and these honorable women. I mean, I'm so thrilled and honored, and I thought about that, and I do feel that women need to be role models, particularly as you get older. You need to be the role model for the younger women, mm-hmm. and to show that you can be vibrant and intelligent and active at any age, and committed and involved. And I ran my first marathon at 50, partly because of that, because I wanted to prove to myself not to be afraid of getting older, because in my generation, people didn't say their ages, you know, and for a young child, that's scary. Why not? Mm-hmm. Where now, for women, you know, what I would say to younger women is find your passion. You know, find what you love to do, and you don't even have to rationalize why. If you're drawn to something, it could be the blood memory, go to it, and then all sorts of wonderful people and opportunities can come from that. So, and you can't tell people what that passion is.
Sure. I think that's great advice, to follow your passions. First find them, but then to follow them. So Colleen, I want to thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. And you are truly an example of how one woman can really make a big difference in our world. Thank you. And I'd like to thank our viewers for tuning in and learning about the lives and accomplishment of women who have been honored by the Marin Women's Hall of Fame.